Hello YouTube and welcome to the episode 2 of the Educated Barbarian about Stoicism. And we're going to pick off where we left it last week. And if you remember, the very last discussion we had was about the distinction between vices and the importance it had for Stoicism because it defines the attitude of the Stoic. And I think that it is really important because there are many people nowadays who call themselves Stoics who, according to the definition by Marcus Aurelius, would fall way out of the category, meaning that they misunderstand how to apply the Stoic mindset to their life, and therefore they turned it into something that is much more akin to sociopathy or detachment, cold detachment, and that's not what Stoicism is. So the more we discuss it, the more I'm going to try and help you understand and apply those principles to your life. Do every deed, speak every word, think every thought, in the knowledge that you may end your days any moment. To depart from men, if there be really gods, is nothing terrible. The gods could bring no evil things upon you. And if there be no gods, or if they have no regard to human affairs, why should I desire to live in a world void of gods and without providence? So this is for the people who are familiar with French philosophy, is related to Pascal's dilemma, or it's a theological idea and quote unquote mystery or enigma where it is basically a choice to make between believing in God or not. And if you think about it logically, without any religious aspirations or sensibilities, sorry, you will understand that believing in God is always better simply because the direction that your life is going to take, regardless of if you do believe in it or not, always ends up as a net positive. Meaning that if you do believe in God, then you just lived your life properly in accordance with morals, and therefore when you pass away, well, you've lived a life worth living, and whether there was a God or not doesn't change anything. And if there was a God, you're going to get your reward or whatever. But if you didn't believe in a God, one, you're not following any type of moral conducts, and two, if you end up dying and there is a God, now what do? You're going to be bound to an eternity of hell. Of course, I personally don't believe in that, and as he says here, you could also apply what Marcus Aurelius says to the idea of, do you really want a God that would punish people for eternity just because they didn't believe in it? But that's a different discussion. Here, mostly what I get from this is the idea first that your life on this earth, while it might be the only thing you have because you don't know if you'll have another one, is not something so important to the self that losing it would really mean anything. Because in a way, once you lose it, it's not like you're moving on to something different or that you could regret it. Because as he said, if that was the case, then it would mean you would go to the realm of the gods. And if there was nothing after that, you would have no conscience to regret what you lost. So the departure in reality can only be painful in the moment as you depart before your death. And that is something that, again, in the acceptation of death is very important to understand. What suffers is the self. It's not the self that will die. Because the self that will die either passes on to a better world or disappears. It is the office of our rational power to apprehend how swiftly all things vanish, how the corporal forms are swallowed up in the material world, and the memory of them is the tide of ages. Such are all the things of sense, especially those which ensnare us with pleasure or terrify us with pain, or those things which vanity trumpets in our ears. How mean, how despicable, how sordid, how perishable, how dead are they? What are they whose opinions and whose voices bestow renown? What is it to die? Your mind can tell you that, did a man think of it alone, and by close consideration strip it of its ghastly trappings, he would no longer deem it anything but a work of nature. To dread a work of nature is a childish thing. A lot of things to unpack. First off, I really like the last sentence because the resistance to the natural order of the universe is extremely childish indeed. And this is something that we're all guilty of. Things that happen to us or happens to people we love or people we're connected with, that just are normal, meaning that it has happened to humans for thousands of years and it will happen for thousands of years. Refusing to accept them doesn't change the fact that they still happen. And it's a waste of energy because those chaotic events cannot be prevented. And if they could be prevented, then you could spend energy on them and it would change them. But these things hurt us and annoy us. Why? Because we don't have control. It's the entire reason why you now have an entire portion of the population that in reality is deeply resentful of biology and of the human nature, basically, because they feel like it's the one thing they don't control. Technology and the modern world has told us and sold us the idea that we are the masters of this planet, we're the master of the universe, which is completely untrue, of course, but that illusion is very poignant in some people. And therefore, the second that something doesn't fall in line with their new vision of the world and how it should function, they throw a temper tantrum. And it is something that in your behavior needs to be corrected at all times. And death falls within that. Death is just death. It's you moving on to something different. It's an evolution of life. And the interesting thing too is that in reality, all of the folklore, all of the negative energy surrounding death is cultural. We made it so because it was, of course, in the books for it to become that. But understand that there are certain cultures that have no fear of death and they don't associate death with something bad. Some African cultures, for example, if you go to a wake, people dance. The way the corpse is put into the ground, the corpse is put in the middle of the village. They grow trees on it. They walk around on the tombs. Why? Because the death was not something solemn. In Western cultures, we have the bodies all put together in a cemetery, and you can say that it's good or that it's bad. But we do sanctify death as a negative event, and it has an impact on our lives, and especially on the lives of the people who come afterwards. Because if you think about it, the person who dies doesn't care. They don't live here anymore. But their death has an influence on the way people are going to perceive their own death in the future. And if you are someone who had people around you die, and they died a certain way, a painful way, they didn't want to go, most likely it got you traumatized, and now you are going to have an issue handling your own mortality. And that is not a fatality, you can still work on it, but you're working with a disadvantage here. He also sort of talks about the fact that the agency of the people who die by themselves represents something that would mean that because of their low stature and the fact that most people really do not matter much, it shouldn't terrify us to let them go, but that's something that I'm going to discuss later because he repeats it. Nothing, says the poet, is more miserable than to range over all things, to spy into the depths of the earth, and search by conjecture into the souls of those around us, yet not to perceive that it is enough for a man to devote himself to that divinity which is within him, and to pay it genuine worship. So that's super important and super interesting too, because look at the world, look at the planet, look at the 7 billion people on it. You will never be able to scrutinize all of these people. And yet, that is the mindset of someone who cares about others. Because if you care about someone else, in reality, you are trying to understand their thought when they don't actually word them. You're trying to apprehend their perception of you, even if they didn't actually make a judgment. And therefore, you're really creating sense when there is no sense. People who are self-conscious fail to realize that most people don't care about who you are. To relate that to the gym, a lot of noobs don't want to go to the gym because they think people make fun. People don't make fun. People don't even notice you're there. They don't know you exist, and that's great. And that's the case for most of your life. You're going to float through life with people who don't even notice you, and that's normal. And it should be a relief because it means that now you can spend time on the most important person on earth, which is you. And a lot of people, and that is the entire myth and the misconstruction of the narcissistic mindset, the narcissistic archetype, which has basically boiled down to if you think of yourself as great, if you love yourself, if you reflect upon who you are, then you are arrogant or conceited, etc. Nothing could be further from the truth. People who tend to be arrogant are people who need to feel better than others. And what do? They compare their performance with others, but what they really do is they look at others, and that is their first mistake. A lot of that perceived arrogance and just narcissism in itself really comes from a low confidence and from vulnerabilities. If you are free from these, you are free from ego in a sense, and therefore you're not arrogant. And that is only achievable through perfect understanding of who you are, and that is the work of a lifetime. It takes a lifetime to really discover who you are. So you need to start now. Though you should live 3,000... Oh, they forgot the letters here. Though you should live 3,000 years or as many myriads, yet remember that no man loses any other life than which now lives, nor lives any other than that which he is now losing. The longest and the shortest lives come to one effect. The present moment is the same for all men, and our loss, therefore, is equal, for it is clear that they lose in death is but a fleeting instant of time. No man can lose either the part of the future, for how can a man be deprived of what he has not? So I think that this talks about the fear of loss. And we tend to fear losing things that we either know we cannot lose or that were never ours in the first place. And the few things we cannot lose is, I personally deal with that and struggle with that. I personally am afraid of changing, meaning that I'm afraid of losing who I am. I'm afraid of not being able to see what I see in my brain right now. And that, for example, expresses itself when I brainstorm ideas for videos. The idea is in my head, and yet I need to write it down because there is a fear in me that it's going to escape me, that I'm going to wake up tomorrow a different person that doesn't have this idea anymore. And of course, it's entirely stupid, but the anxiety is still here. And so that for you is going to also be the same. You are going to become defensive and you're going to try and protect grounds and territories of your own personality that you know are there to stay because there are things that you like about yourself. It's already really tough to change and get rid of our flaws. So what about your positive qualities? You think they're going to go away? Most likely they won't, especially not from their own accord. You will see it coming so you can relax. And on the other category, things that were never ours in the first place. Those things really need to be let go because in reality, they don't exist. And you need to understand that a lot of that is concepts. For example, if you think about freedom as something that can be taken away from you, then you are already, in a sense, losing your freedom. Because freedom cannot be stripped from you. You can be tied to a tree, you are limited physically, but you're still free. And across the board, that understanding of the principal notions of what being a man or being a human is, and the understanding that you cannot lose them because they cannot be taken away from you, because they exist in a state of non-existence through your action, is what is important. As long as you want to be free, you are free. When you start succumbing and you surrender your freedom, you lose your freedom. Even if it looks on the outside as if you still have all of the qualities and attributes of a free man, you are not free anymore. And that's what Marcus Aurelius is trying to convey here. Beyond opinion, there is nothing. Clear, simple, and yet something that applies to every single aspect of dialogue, philosophy, literature, science. It's all based on opinion. There is no such thing as an absolute truth. And there is an attachment of, especially the science type, who wants to say, oh no, there are absolute truths of the universe. What they fail to understand is that the same truth can be misinterpreted. It can be seen via different scopes. It can be utilized for different means. And that's what it means when Marcus Aurelius says that beyond opinion, there is nothing. It's because you still need an opinion to make a judgment call on something. Even if it's what you would consider to be the most basic standard truth. For example, humans need oxygen to live. Okay? That is still an opinion. Because the way you're going to articulate that argument and the way you're going to look at it is going to be based around your sensibility. It's going to be based around what you're going to make of it. Because in reality, saying that does nothing. I'm going to take another example. Is the earth flat or round? Why do you want to know that? What is the point of knowing that? What are you going to make with that information? I see a lot of people fighting over science debates and things like this. And the question I want to ask is, why that energy you're spending into deciding if that opinion is correct or not, what are you going to make of it? And for the most part, they don't have an answer, because what they're really trying to do is they're trying to prove that their opinion is not an opinion, it's an absolute truth. Once you understand that there is no such thing and that some people cannot be convinced because you cannot change their opinion, you understand also that the truth in itself is falling into the same category that I described before. It's something that exists outside of the realm of existence, because it can only really come into fruition when people connect with it with their mind and they express an opinion on it. And to expand on that idea a little bit more, if there is a concept out there that has received no opinions, meaning that people never think about it, that concept does not exist. Meaning that if we discover something brand new in science, it will not mean that this thing didn't exist before. It meant that the human ability to connect with it mentally was not there. And therefore, you can also apply the reverse to that, meaning that things that we take for granted now might fall into discrepancy and just be completely forgotten. Have they disappeared? No, our opinions about them disappeared. Keep that in mind, because across the board on my channel, this is a mindset I apply to everything, because I truly resonate with that. Opinion is extremely important, and people who refuse to understand that subjectivity is everywhere are going to be at a loss, because this is how this world works. This is how humans work. Existence is a warfare and a journey in a strange land, and the end of fame is to be forgotten. What then avails to guide us? One thing and one alone: philosophy. And this consists in keeping the divinity within inviolate and intact, victorious over pain and pleasure, free from temerity, free from falsehood, free from hypocrisy, independent of what others do or fail to do. This could be the banner of this channel, to be honest, because I again cannot state how much I connect with this. Every single word is a truth. Existence is a warfare. Life is war. It's a constant battle and fight. And it should be, because if it stops being life, and you start to devolve. You don't stagnate. Humans don't stagnate. We evolve or we devolve. A lot of people on this earth have been devolving. And you need to be evolving. If you're on this channel, with your muscles, with your spirit, you need to always strive towards progression, always. A journey in a strange land. Yes, because if you base the idea that I just described of opinion on the word, anything that exists outside of your mind is strange, because it's not you. Even your body is strange. In reality, we're connected with it, and to an extent, some people are more connected than others, but understand that this vessel of flesh could be at some point in your life something so foreign that it is going to be the equivalent of a furniture item, meaning that you're going to lose the ability to recognize yourself in it. And because you exist in it all the time and you move all the time, it's not going to happen anytime soon, but there exists certain conditions where it could happen. And now apply that to everything else. Apply that to other humans, apply that to the ground, apply that to the forest. All of these are strange things. And because they are strange, we are able to apply our opinion to it, because our mind dictates their existence and their state of existence across the board. Everything you see, every time you see something, it's not just your eyes who see, it's your mind who filters it. At the end of fame is to be forgotten, of course, and this is why fame is stupid and it's a worthless value. And the people who respect fame don't understand that in reality they respect the void. Because fame ends, and we all end up being forgotten. And whether you are forgotten or not doesn't matter. What matters, in my opinion, and that's not something he says, it's just what I think, is the impact you had on people so that they can better their own life. Not the impact that they remember you as someone who helped them or changed their life. Just the fact that their life changed is enough, because it creates positive energy in this world, and that is a net positive. And across the board, whether people remember or realize that you did that for them doesn't matter, because in reality, you didn't do that for them. You were an alien, an object, an item, some words on the wind that their opinion caught and that allowed them to change what makes that opinion matter, which is their mind. What then avails to guide us? One thing and one alone: philosophy. And this is what we are trying to grasp in this series. This consists of keeping the divinity within invalid and intact, so this is you, and we'll get to that later, but he's pretty much already discussing the big idea of nihilism, that God is dead because God is you and God was always you. The idea of God was created by humans to explain our own agency, but I'll get to that also. Victorious over pain and pleasure, because pain and pleasures are opinions as well. They are not objective facts. They happen to you, but you have the choice to let them happen or not. You have the choice to be a victim of them or not. Free from temerity, free from falsehood, free from hypocrisy. All things that taint opinion and that make it, while still subjective, of course, because it remains subjective, too subjective, because now it becomes an opinion that cannot be shared with others because it has been tainted. Independent of what others do or fail to do, and that might be the most important thing. The minds of others cannot move your mind. What moves your mind is the pressure you feel from aligning with others. That's what can change you. And across the board, you need to make sure that it never happens, because it's never a good thing. Because even if you change your mind or opinion and you start doing something positive, understand that that same positive impact and change in your life could have come from yourself. You had to let someone else do it for you, which is no good. And a lot of people aren't going to resonate with that, but I truly think that if you embrace the words of Musashi that says that once you know one thing, you know 10,000 things, it means that if you can look at the opinion of someone who offers good advice and modify it so that it actually fits your life but in a different fashion, you helped yourself. Now you didn't follow someone, you didn't do what someone else does, you did your own thing, but you learned from projecting your own opinion. And that was actually the end of book 2. See, it goes pretty fast. Let's see here. Let me just check the time because I sort of lost myself in the process here. Okay. I think that we're going to make this one extra long. Observe what grace and charm appear even in the accidents that accompany nature's work. Such a man will contemplate in the real world the fierce jaws of wild beasts with no less delight than when sculptors or painters set forth for him their presentments. With like pleasure will his chaste eyes behold the maturity and grace of old age in men and women, and the inviting charms of youth. Many such things will strike him, things not credible to the many, but which come to him alone, who is truly familiar with the works of nature and near to her own heart. So this is connected directly to the idea of making sure your opinion and your subjective view of the world is not tainted, because there is an objective substance to be received out there. And if you look at it from the scope of a filtering of opinions, your opinion is by default subjective. You are receiving an objective environment. If in the middle you add either the perception that the nature is subjective, or you taint that already subjective filter, you are going to receive an image that is either going to be blurry or not even receivable at all. And that's what he describes here. A lot of people are blind to their environment because they are unable to actually utilize their opinion. Their eyes are closed at all points, at all times. A lot of things in this modern life are culprits and facilitate that type of behavior. Your phone, for example, you walk around and you're like this. Now you only see the phone, you don't see what's around you. And the worst part is that even when the phone is not there, you are now so used to utilize that device that the ability to have a wide scope and a wide view is almost lost to you. And that's not good. You need to relearn how to actually take in a big panorama. And this is important also because if you can appreciate nature, you can understand nature. And because you yourself are from nature, it's going to give you a deeper understanding of who you are. And this is what I say when I said that some people don't like the idea that they are part of that big chain of living beings. They don't like their own biology because they have lost touch with it. And now it is foreign. It's what I described before with your body. Their body is foreign. They don't like their body. You know those types. It's the type that are going to constantly be self-demeaning. They're going to always have a certain level of disgust even for human functions. When in reality, those are just nature. It's just the way we are built and the way we are supposed to live and evolve in this world. And they also lose the ability to perceive beauty. They also lose the ability to perceive beauty through every single age of man, because it's very easy to say that a 20-year-old girl is good looking. It's easy to say that a guy who's built and 25 is good looking, he's beautiful. Okay, great. This is the easiest denominator of beauty. Can you see beauty somewhere else? Can you see beauty in the hands of someone who is now 75, who worked his entire life for his country? Do you see beauty in the curved back of a woman who had 4 kids and who had to carry them around to put them to bed and now has a bad back? Can you actually perceive the human existence and the human experience past simple signs of beauty? Is it possible? And in reality it is, but that would mean being able to really dive deep in your emotions, utilizing your opinion of things. And that comes from observation. And again, if you are able to observe strongly outwards, you are able to observe strongly inwards, and vice versa. I personally encourage you to start inward and then go outward. You have gone aboard, made your voyage, come to harbor, disembark. If into another life, there will be God also. If into nothingness, at least you will have done with bearing pain and pleasure, and with your slavery to this vessel so much meaner than its slave. For the soul is intelligence and deity, the body dust and corruption. So that is a dichotomy that is very important to establish now for Stoicism. The ruling part is not the part, meaning that there is a clear distinction between the spirit and the body it inhabits, and the body is seen as meaner. But it does not mean that it needs to be forgotten or that it needs to be put aside or even maltreated or mistreated, because it is where the spirit lives. So it needs to be in tip-top condition as well, and you need to have a good understanding of it because you understand the vessel and therefore you understand the captain as well. But what is said here is important. What you are going to lose when you die is really the vessel, because the spirit either vanishes and therefore ceases to be and could have never been in reality if you look at it in a time loop, or it passes on onto bigger and better things, but you're leaving the body behind because, and that's the entire point of paradise and heaven in every single religion. If you look at the text, the spirit becomes the vessel, meaning that the outside envelope vanishes and the form that you take in that new environment that you can call heaven if you like is going to be pure spirit. And of course, if you look at representations of heaven, you see people with bodies, but it's because you sort of have to. You can't just make a little dot and say this is a person. Some people like to represent that as souls, so it's like what is the name of that? An inferno, a little flame, a blue flame that floats around, but even that is a physical representation of a body. In reality, you're going to become pure because you're going to be detached by the one thing that was not pure, the body, but you needed that thing that was impure because you exist in an impure environment. If you were a pure spirit, you couldn't exist. And in a sense, what I just said also explains why some people who believe in ghosts and in ghosts or spirits might be mistaken in a sense, because the existence of a pure spirit in this world is almost impossible, because if it was possible, you and I could transcend into pure spirits right here and there. Of course, you can argue that it could be that they're on a different plane, so we can see them, and we sometimes see them if they cross dimensions, or they can have replaced the spiritual body with an object, and therefore they can sometimes come out. That also is something that I'm going to leave for ghost hunters, but it's an interesting talk, I think. Waste not what remains in life in consideration about others, when it makes not for the common good. Be sure you are neglecting other work if you busy yourself with what such a one is doing and why with what he is saying, thinking, or scheming. All such things do but divert you from the steadfast guardianship of your own soul. Explained before, it will be said 1,000 times. Someone said it in the comment, and I appreciate you saying it, I forgot. This is a journal. It wasn't something meant to be shared. It was something that Marcus Aurelius wrote every day to help himself study his philosophy. And it was basically a guide, a log for his own travels in the realm of philosophy. But for us here, it also means that we're going to hear a lot of things on repeat, but I'm going to try and give it a twist and a different interpretation every single time. So for this one, it's interesting that he talks also about the common good, because if you think about the populace and you look at people, if people gossip, shouldn't that mean that participating in the gossip is also for the common good? Everyone does it. And in reality, it's not, because once you start participating in the gossip, you become the gossip. And therefore, you create more material for gossip. And you, one, encourage people to continue on that path where instead of discovering themselves, they discover others. And two, you are also becoming corrupted. And that is YouTube Fitness. Most of YouTube Fitness is that. If you look at it, if you deleted every single video that talks about other people instead of talking about concepts, 80% of YouTube Fitness would disappear. The most popular videos would disappear because that's what they are. They're drama videos, and drama is about others. No one makes videos looking within themselves, and I'm the same. My character studies are about someone else. I try to make them about concepts because I talk about psychology, but in reality, I'm still falling into something that the Stoic mindset would find unacceptable. And this is where I sort of draw the line also, because you find too that this quote-unquote refusal to engage and, partake in the mud-slinging has its limits. Because if you're the one Stoic in a crowd of 99% other idiots, then understand you're going to be dragged down. Meaning that if you believe in society and you believe in the pursuing of civilizations, you're going to have to meddle at some point, and meddling means that sometimes you have to do the dirty work. And in those cases, I'm perfectly okay not being Stoic anymore. I can sort of switch it on and off. Some people will tell you that you're either Stoic all the time or you're not. I don't personally agree with that mindset, because to me it's buying into a group, into a label. So I would say be careful with that. A man unspotted from pleasure, unwounded by any pain, inaccessible to all insults, innocent of all evil, a champion in the noblest of all contests. The he contests twice, really? The contest for victory over every passion. He used contest twice, that's bad writing. I'm pretty sure it's just a translation, but yeah. He is penetrated by justice. He welcomes with all his heart whatever befalls, or is appointed by providence. He troubles not often or ever without pressing public need to consider what another may say or do or design, solely intent upon his own conduct, ever mindful of his own concurrent part in the destiny of the universe. He orders his conduct well, persuaded that his part is good. So this is the equivalent of the Alpha Chad meme, but from ancient Rome. So this is pretty much a list of qualities that the Stoic has to pursue. And interestingly enough, it's the same thing I said before. This might be a standard so high that most would consider that unreachable. And it might be true, because the beauty of that is, if the standard was reachable, then it would be a human standard, and would it even be worthy of our consideration? I don't think so. I think it's great that it's something that seems almost godlike, because it means we get something to reach for. And if you look at the line of qualities here, unwounded by any pain, that would be tough to do, but it's doable. Unspoiled by pleasure, we are humans, we love pleasure. Our bodies are wired to love that, and by bodies I also mean brain, so that also is going to be complicated. I'm personally not free from pleasure, far from it. Inaccessible to our insult, that's I think is one of the easiest one, because once you detach yourself from others and you don't really care about what they think anymore, an insult is really nothing, because it doesn't have the power to hurt you anymore. Innocent of all evil, same thing. I do believe that sometimes you have to do evil things to combat evil, but that is something we'll discuss when we talk about nihilism, I think. And the rest, yeah, it's he troubles not often. So you see that even here, he's not saying he never troubles, because he understands that it's not realistic. He troubles not often. So sometimes you can let your emotions, take the reign, but not often. So I think I'm going to leave you with that. And that's going to be it for this episode of the Educated Barbarian. Have a good day.